All right, good afternoon, everybody. It is webinar time. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jesse Stapp with Go for Sport, and I will be moderating today. We have another great speaker and topic for you. Quite a few of you are probably familiar with our webinar series. For those of you that are new, welcome. This is a monthly series that focuses on relevant topics in the world of physical education, from assessment to new and exciting ways to work in fitness into your curriculum. We keep it fresh with a new topic and guest every month. Before we get started, a few housekeeping things. Everyone attending will get a certificate of participation in a few days' time. So if you are receiving training hours or continuing education credits, that certificate will be your proof of attendance. The recording will also be sent if you wanted to listen back to a specific portion or in case you missed a section. And please join us in the conversation as we go along. And you can do that by typing your questions in the Q&A portion on the right-hand side of your screen. As we go, I'll be collecting the questions, and then we will have a Q&A section towards the end. And lastly, we do have a very appropriate prize for one lucky attendee today. We are going to be giving away our STEM in the Gym Big Gears Demonstrator Pack, perfect for any STEM curriculum. Okay, let's get into our speaker today. I'll introduce Dr. Joanne Margaret Hynes-Hunter, and she is joining us. We're thrilled to have her speak on the topic of STEM to STEAM, a holistic approach to learning in K-12 physical education. And I'm going to read a brief bio about Dr. Hunter, but I am warning you, it's pretty impressive, so stick with me here. Dr. Joanne Margaret Hynes-Hunter is the youngest student to receive her doctorate in the kinesiology program at Columbia University at the age of 28 in 1997. She is a certified adapted physical education, CAPE certified teacher, has taught public high school physical education and health, private elementary school PE in New York City, as well as over 40 courses as a professor at Hofstra, Towson, California Polytechnic, Old Dominion, and George Mason universities, and at numerous community colleges. Dr. Hunter was inducted as a research fellow into the Society of Health and Physical Educators by Shape America, and that was in 2003, back when it was AFER Group, and earned the Mabel Lee Award from Shape America in 1999. Dr. Hunter has authored 30 peer-reviewed articles published in research and trade journals, 14 books, 14 book chapters, and presented over 200 professional development conferences and multi-day trainings in the field of kinesiology. And she has just accepted the position as editor-in-chief for the Journal of Teaching, Research, and Media in Kinesiology. So we are very excited to have you with us today, Dr. Hunter. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm going to get right to it. We're going to be discussing STEM and STEAM in physical education. We are going to review the term STEM and introduce STEAM and its incarnations. We're going to be discussing why physical educators in particular should be interested in teaching STEAM throughout physical movement and games. And finally, you're going to leave this webinar with numerous STEAM activities that you can bring right into your physical activity games, including standard-based assessments. So without further ado, I give you what is STEM. And STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And before it was STEM, it was actually called METS. Let's go Mets, New York, yay. Before it was Mets, it was actually called STEM Tech, which was Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math Teacher Education Collaborative, and also known as a big mouthful. And so the Foundation of Science and Math, who is the organization created the acronym, decided to just make it STEM in 1998, which sounded more scientific than METS, go figure. Anyway, the purpose of STEM education is to prepare students for the opportunities and challenges in the changing world. And educators and workforce experts state that students need specific skills to successfully participate in the global economy. And therefore, a lot of time and money goes to schools with a STEM and STEAM program. STEAM is the same as STEM, but of course there's an A in the acronym, which represents arts. Although A has also stood for aeronautics, as well as aviation, astronomy, and aerospace. The arts, which includes creative thinking and innovation, are also needed in today's world. It's not just the science, technology, engineering, and math, but it also has some other incarnations. It was also known as STREAM, where the R stands for reading or robotics. So you'll see that coming up more often in today's literature and educational systems. There's also STEAM Glass, which adds the notion of geography, language arts, and social studies. And even though the letters may stand for different subjects, the idea is all the same, that we need to integrate content area to maximize connections to increase student learning. So why are we looking at STEAM and STEM? And I know I'm really preaching to the choir here, but I know your colleagues are probably ready to burn you at the stake for heresy, bringing the voodoo we call STEAM into the gymnasium. So really, this information is to help you perhaps convince them why STEAM is important. The University of Florida created this great infographic, which you see in front of you here on the slide, which shows you the benefits of STEM on the left brain, because that's the logical mathematical part, as well as then STEAM, which is the right brain, and how that functions, and the creativity and the arts. And we all learn differently in different situations. And so the more parts of the brain a teacher can involve when we're trying to teach students, the more the students will learn and can recall that information. And teachers encourage STEAM because it supports the whole child. It creates a deeper, more meaningful learning. It addresses diverse learning styles through utilizing what's known as multiple intelligences. And I've been using multiple intelligences in STEAM in my K through 12 and university physical education programs since 1993. And why? Because 95% of your students taking physical education are not kinesthetic learners. And with the obesity epidemic crisis, physical educators can really kill two birds with one stone using STEAM. Following my line of thinking here, the STEAM increases student motivation, which gets them moving. Increasing the number of students and participating in physical education will decrease obesity rates. It's a win-win situation. And my motto was actually adapted from Howard Gardner, who is the man who invented multiple intelligences. And he says that it's not how smart you are, but how are you smart? And keep that in mind while you're going through some of the activities that we're doing today. And it has different entry points, so the student can start to learn, reflect, and get an understanding of the world. And STEAM is the hook needed, especially for the unathletic students, to become involved and shine in physical education. If I ask you why you wanted to become a physical educator, I know the answer wouldn't be for money, glory, or fame. I'm sure it would be because you wanted to help children and young adults like physical activity and become more lifetime movers. That's not going to happen if you only teach to one intelligence or one learning style. So we really need to get all students physically literate through using STEAM. And there are pedagogical principles that I use when I create some STEAM games. And I'm sharing the games that I've created with you. But you can use your own games in thinking how STEAM is relevant for you. And in those games, developmentally appropriateness, make sure that the games are fun, that they are moderate to vigorous physical activities that are taught, and that includes no elimination. Everybody should participate. There should be limited time waiting in line for either a turn or equipment. All games are based on the physical national standards, which we're going to talk about today. They address STEM as well as literacy standards, because I know a lot of you out there are now forced, I say forced, but it truly is, that we have to 10 to literacy. And so all of those are being done here in these games. So they really encompass all 5 standards. You have assessments that go with them, and all lessons meet the standards and objectives. What are students going to learn as a result of the lesson, and how are you going to demonstrate that the students learned? And so one last thing to keep in mind is to make sure that these games, can be played anytime, anywhere. They can be played in school, before school, after school, outdoors, indoors. Most of the games require little or no equipment. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with science games and then move up technology, engineering, arts, and math as we go through this quick time together. And as you see, many of the games do cross over into one another, and so that makes it even more STEAM related. So the first game that we're going to look at is called Trivia Challenge. And here the students line up at one end of the court. And in the diagram on your slide, that would be where the blue poly spots are. What you're going to do is place a piece of equipment on the poly spot, whether that be a basketball because you want the students to also practice dribbling, or a soccer ball to practice foot dribbling, or lacrosse stick, whatever you need. That's the activity that's going to be focused on. But the idea is when the students are lined up, what they're going to do is, if you notice, there are cones on the side and poly spots then in front of the third of the court. The distance of and between these are based on the student's age and developmental appropriateness, with the number of cones and a larger distance between the cones based on your student's ability. Because what you're going to do is ask the students a question, and the students in whole will raise their hand, whoever might have that answer. You choose that student then answers. If it is correct, as the students are bouncing their basketball or, cradling the lacrosse stick with the ball in it, if the answer is correct, they all move up one cone. If the question is not answered correctly, you can, again, based on developmentally appropriateness, either stay at the same cone or move them back one. And so play continues in this manner until students get to the green poly spots. And the questions, and we're about to see some of the questions in just a moment, are science-based, or they could be math-based. And I'm sorry I couldn't put everything on one slide, so bear with me in just a moment. And so where the green poly spots are, at this time, students decide, do they want to shoot to try to get a goal? And I use lower goals, but you can, if you're doing basketball, I know students love to shoot. And so that's usually my motivation for them to continue and wanting to play, is shoot on goal. And so they can do that, where they then get a rubber band, and then the rubber band is placed on them, and if they get the shot, and then they go back to the blue poly spot, and we continue answering questions. And the one with the most rubber bands wins. Now, if they choose not to shoot, they can still have 2 more questions to get them closer to the goal. Because if they get the goal, they get the rubber band. If they do not make the shot, then they have to go back to the beginning with nothing. And so here we're differentiating the activity. They can choose, do they want to shoot to score? Do they want to get that rubber band early to see if they can get more rubber bands? It could be a rubber band, it could be something else that you give them. That's up to you. I know people use the tongue depressors or, something that indicates that they answered the question, they shot the goal, they got it, they could then go back to the start. So some of the questions that you can ask them in terms of, here I have, for the right-hand side is for older students, true and false, muscles take oxygen out of blood, and you would then again, either for younger children, ask the classroom teacher what is he or she talking about in class, or it could be information that you're talking to the students about in terms of health-related fitness or again, we're trying to focus on science, but again, you can ask them math questions and say 2 times 2 equals what, or whatever it might be that you want the students to focus on. But the idea is there, and then you can take that and run with it. So I know I hate reinventing the wheel, which is why I love doing webinars and love presenting, because once you get that idea, then you come up with your own. And that's really what it's really all about, is to take this information, help each other, and work on that. You could talk about cues, you could talk about tactics, strategies, vocabulary, whatever you wish, and you understand, do the students get the information through answering the questions if they are right or not. So next, some of the modifications that you can have for the classes, use just true or false questions, use multiple choice with only 2 answers, make questions easier, use fewer questions, making the game a little bit harder, create harder questions for them, using more cones so there's more questions that they have to answer, have the students perform trick shots. So maybe they get extra points if they make that, behind the back shot, or do a foot chip into a goal, do a volleyball bump or a slap shot. That's all up to you. But again, the idea is there. For assessment, I do something different. This one was looking specifically at addressing Standard 5. And here, Standard 5 focuses on how students can value physical activity. And so here, I created a die. And so what the students do is roll the die, which you've already pre-made, and that looks like this. And so whatever the word lands on, the student then has to explain. For example, if they land on health, I value physical activity because, and they would have to come up with a health-related answer. Or there's, self-exploration or challenge. And so each time that they come up with a word, they have to explain in written form. So here again is that literacy, what makes them value physical activity because of that specific word. The next is technology, and looking at Exploratorium website. They have some really awesome STEM-related and STEAM-related sports physical activities. So you could take a look at some of their lesson plans. They have great labs, resources. They're like web quests where the students go off and they answer questions at the different websites, and learning about different types of equipment, looking at the physics behind throwing a baseball. There's some really interesting things on the Exploratorium. And so I give you those websites. There's also some really awesome tech that you may or may not be, that you know about. Another really good science is the human body. If you want the students to look more into their bones and muscles and organs and what they do in terms of physical activity, that is the UK Science/Human Body link. There's also a great free app, and I always tell my students, when my university students, as well as when I do presentations, you are already expected to pay a lot of money for all different things. So when I talk about apps, these are all free apps that you can use. There are paid memberships if you wanted to do the extra, but you don't have to. The Huddle Technique is a slow motion video analysis app. And what I have here, they show videos side by side. So you can have students perform some kind of physical activity and do like pre-test and then post-test scores, and look at what your difference in motion is, because you can write right on it. As you see in the slide here, you can do angles. So here you can integrate math. They can analyze their video performance in slow motion. They can analyze their friends' video in slow motion and analyze the two together. So there's a lot of assessment that you can do with that. And again, this is all looking at NASPE standard, NASPE, I still call it NASPE, the National Physical Education Standards for 2, which is looking at cognitive and doing biomechanical analysis. Other free apps that are really good, Pics allows a 30-second snapshot, if you will, of a speaking image soundbite. And so either students can create, take a picture of a basketball, and then you draw a smile or this mouth to it, and then it starts talking. And so this is a great idea for the students to do, like the history of a sport, talking about equipment that was used way back when, and have a laced basketball, explain how it used to be stuffed with horsehair and thrown around by 10 other players on a court and not bounced. I love using basketball because, oh my gosh, it has changed so much throughout the years. Or you can have the students take pictures of themselves performing cues of a basketball dribble, let's say. And so their pictures will then talk and say, I need to use my finger pads rather than my fingertips, and I need to keep it below my waist, and so on. And so there are just endless ideas, but the idea is technology and go from there. Sketchbook is a free app for older students where an image can be drawn freehand or a picture can be changed. So you can have students create their own offensive and defensive position using X's and O's, or say here, is a play, where should that X, what position should this ball be, shot to in order to score. So there's some examples there on the slide for you to take a look at of all the different things that you can do. Doodle Buddy is then for younger students, and that is a little easier to create X's and O's. They also do things with freehand drawings, and they can work with peers. And so they can work on projects together because it's emailed to one another. And then they also can email it to you as a teacher, so you don't have to worry about papers anymore. Yay, paperless. And so all of these are some great technology information. Moving right along with looking at engineering. I know with engineering we think, well, what can we do in physical education? Well, there's a lot we can do with engineering. One is this hoop glider. I just presented at the Shape America National Conference, and we were using the hoop gliders, which is just a straw and 2 paper, different size papers. And the students create that, and it is then a throwing and catching toy that they can play, and then you can play games with that. But they engineered it, and then you can do all sorts of engineering questions with, such as, placement of the ring, size of the ring. We found that the bubble straws, bubble teas, that for the Asian drinks, those have a much bigger diameter straw, and they really work a lot better than regular straws. You can also do engineering a better helmet. There's some websites there for you to take to look at that give you lesson plans on here's the history of the helmet, and especially nowadays with the problem of people having concussions, and have the students create, well, what's the new helmet going to look like? And so there are a couple of different ideas there for you for engineering. Next on the list, and sorry, I'm trying to scroll down, is art. Art can be done with what's known as Sketch a Stretch, which is a game creating on looking at standard 4, looking at personal responsible social behavior. Here, the students are given either a body part or a muscle to stretch, and using a chair, and I'll explain why a chair in just a moment. It'll become more apparent. And so here the students would have a piece of paper and they would then invent or already come up with something that they already know of a stretch for something that you already give them. And they can do this individually or they can do it in partners. They then do a think, pair, share kind of a thing so that they each practice their own stretches and see, well, give each other feedback on, hey, you wrote this well, or I didn't understand what you meant here. And as a follow-up with the sketch a stretch, here you have the body parts, ideas, as well as the muscles, or you can do it as a word problem. So again, you're integrating literacy. So here, for example, I have today is a leg day. We're going to be performing the leg extension in terms of the weight training. And here you need to identify what that muscle is that we use during leg extension, identify if it's eccentric or which one is the eccentric and concentric muscle. I want you to create a stretch for that muscle. And so here you're not giving them the specific body part or muscle. They have to try to figure it out. Again, you do what's developmentally appropriate. Remember, this is K through 12. So you can make it as easy or as difficult as you need to based on your students' information and where they're at. Now, I also included with this here some of the different ideas for doing different stretches, using a chair with a stick figure, and these were all just found on the web. If you do, this one was chair yoga, whereas the next slide here gives specific ideas for using a chair, and then you can, again, depending on where the students are, you use a band, you use a hand weights or foot weights, and all of those would make it a little bit more difficult for them to do and to come up with an idea. And the whole reasoning behind this is then, again, standard 4, understanding differences. And so here you ask them, you created stretches for people sitting in a chair. Well, what populations would benefit from this? And it might be the elderly or people in wheelchairs. And so your second question would be based on that standard and saying, did you and your partner behave patiently throughout this activity or create other activities that would be for these particular populations? Explain one thing if you're talking about patience and how can you use that information outside of class. So again, you're taking what they're learning in the gymnasium and making it, this is what you need to do for outside the gymnasium and in life. And so those are things to keep in mind there. Another art activity is shadows. This is great for younger children. And here is also science, and you would do this outside with using chalk. And so using the sun, you would have the students outline each other's shadows and put down a timestamp. And here then the students can jump in and out and over and balance on their line, create hopscotch grid. They can, there are so many things, again, just giving you ideas, looking at different body characteristics. Can you tell who is who? And then come out later and see, gee, what happened to your shadow? Or where is your line versus where is your shadow now? And so now you're talking about science. And so this is looking at standard number 1, where you have the students then, and I have here for you, looking at their jumping, and here I went online using some of the the yellow lines are angles and stuff using the equipment, the app, Huddle, as well as some students and their drawings, which are kind of weird. But again, that kind of gets away from what you're focus is. And it's okay, and laugh, and just, yeah, you're jumping in and out, you're making hopscotch boards, or you're doing whatever with that shadow, which is interesting, and the kids get into that. Again, that's more for younger children. For them to do that. And here I have them assess the motor skills, so they're jumping, or if they're doing the hopscotch, they're throwing, you can have them leap in and out, again, all sorts of different things, and then you can see how they're doing and evaluate them on their different skills. The next game incorporates almost everything, art, technology, math, where the students perform any repetitive skill. And it can be juggling. I like to do juggling because that kind of levels the playing field for everybody, even athletes. But let's say you're juggling, how many times can you juggle 3 balls or 2 balls? And so they can either do it consecutively or non-consecutively. And based on how many they were able to do, either consecutively, or if you want to just do in 1 minute, how many can you do? And then have the students line up. And after they line up, and here is a picture of them lining up, you can have them stand up, you can have them sit down. You then say, well, how many are in each line? And so you write that down, and you could see, well, how many did it 1 time? How many were able to do it 2 times in a row, 3 times in a row, 4 times in a row? Here I have different types of juggling. Is what I did with my students as well. And how many were they able to do? Because then we did compare, contrast. Well, what do you need work on? You need to really work on your contact juggling because you weren't able to do the butterfly. That's just a skill in doing contact juggling. Whereas what are you really good at? And so now they're doing graphs, and that's math. And so they physically lined up, they did a consecutive amount of whatever it is skill that you want, and now you can make it technology by saying, here's the information, here's the numbers, now go home, or if you have time in class, and say, create an Excel document and explain, and then ask questions such as, well, what do we need work on? What do we not need to work on? Here are numbers from other classes, and so on. And so those are all different ways of getting them involved in art, technology, engineering, and math. Game 7, just flying along here, is the rounding up while slimming down. And this one, you put fitness cards or underneath, and as you see here, we have red domes and black domes. And here they're going to be using math. The students line up on the black, or I'm just here labeling them black, but whatever size domes you have for color domes, but it's a lower number. And what they're going to do is remember that number. They can then jog around, play basketball, whatever the skill is. And then you blow a whistle, and then they go to find another dome, a different dome. And they can either add the numbers and try to find that number. It's kind of a search kind of a game, and I find that students really like to do that. When they find what the sum is, if they were at number 2, and they run around, and then you can either say 2 times 2 is what, and they have to then try to find the number 4. If they were at the number 1, 1 times 2 equals whatever, and so they would have to find the number. And under the number is a fitness card saying you need to do 4 layups, as you see, or perform 30 sit-ups. And so you again decide what kind of math problem they'll do. Do you want them to start at the red, at the black? Then they go, they're dribbling, you blow the whistle, they go to a red, they add the 2 together, they multiply, they find the square root of the number, you decide. Or, as easy for younger kids, just say, start at 2 and give them the number to add, and they'll go to that other number, lift it up, do that exercise that's underneath that particular poly spots. And some of the modifications, and I have some of the information there. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going really fast, is using different numbers. Lower numbers are easier than the higher numbers. I also use fit deck, and here are some fit deck, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel again. So if you're looking at specifically plyometrics, or you want to do basketball, or you're doing TRX, so I just put those fit decks, one card under each of the domes, and so the students can go there and reveal what is my exercise that I have to do, and then we reset, and then, okay, now know what your number is, and we play the game again. Okay, and here's a math computation for them to do of what, rounding up. So I'm sorry, I totally messed that up. I'm going really fast. But yeah, you want them to round up the number or rounding down. So if they're 2 times 2 is 4 and you're rounding up to 10, they have to go to number 10. That again is an added thing if you want to do for your students. I like the name rounding up while slimming down, and so that's why we were rounding up. But you can round down. You don't have to round at all. That's completely up to you. And I created a sheet here for the students to then write and participate in. And then there's some questions that the students can answer based on rounding up and slimming down and working with each other, which is looking at all the different standards. Game 8, looking at $5 math, I use the gliders, and so the students start with 25 cents, and as you're throwing it back and forth to one another, you can, if you're a successful catch or a successful throw, you get that 25 cents. If they're older students, you can tell them, okay, minus 25 cents if you missed it, or you have to go back to 0. That's, again, up to you. And they're trying to reach $5, or you choose whatever the amount of money is, because, again, you're looking specifically at math problems. And then what I do for standard 2, there's throwing and catching, and so here I have them, what is the similarities and differences between throwing overhand versus throwing underhand. And so along with the questions, I also give you the answers, because that drives me nuts when teachers don't do that. And so wrapping up really quickly, reviewing STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, become familiar with then adding art to what we're doing, because we want to do both left side and right side of the brain. We talked about why STEM and STEAM are important in physical education, as well as providing different games for you to use, albeit really quick. And I hope you understood them. If not, please email me. We'll, I guess, give you that contact information, because I know it's really a whirlwind of information. I really thank you all for attending. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hunter. Really awesome stuff. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. And as more and more schools are moving to this STEM or STEAM ideology, this is great advice for us to use in our schools. Some really nice little activities that we can do to get us started here. And we did have several questions as we went, so I'm hoping we can get your quick thoughts on these. First question that we got, do you have any suggestions for mixed age group activities? And I know you mentioned adapting your activities to the age group. What if you have several age groups together? I'm talking recess, before and after school. Any examples there?
Right, and well, that's why I had given the modifications there, because you can either group by, I really don't like to group by age, because you'll have third graders that are, going at 5th or 6th grade level. So say, here's what we're playing. We played this in physical education. But this group over here, we're playing this version of the game. And so then they can choose the different versions of the game that they feel comfortable with playing. So this one is asking questions about math versus, if you're doing that first game of the trivia challenge. And then this one over here, we're asking science questions or, that you can use the modifications and say, this is what we're playing over here. So any age group can come and play because it's whatever skill they're working on and what they want to participate in at their level, and then it's whatever math, and that's at their level. I mean, that's what classroom teachers do, and that's what we should be doing as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Really good advice there. Another question that we got too, and I think this is when we've talked about doing STEM and cross-curricular in the past, the worry is that we might be sacrificing our MVPA time. How do you make sure that these types of activities have enough MVPA? If we only have 45 minutes, 50 minutes, we really got to get that MVPA in there. How do you suggest we do that with these types of activities?
Well, most of them, like that math game, I know I kind of ran through that, but they're like gasping for breath afterwards. I make sure that the activities that they are performing are moderate to vigorous. So some of the one slide for the rounding up while slimming down was perform 30 sit-ups between you and your partner, and so they can either figure that out, or perform 4 layups. So you can decide what activities you want your students to do. So it might be a focus on just strength. It might be focusing on agility. It might be focusing on cardiovascular activities. Each of the different things that you do, you choose what you want your physical activity to be. As I said with the trivia challenge, bouncing a basketball. Well, they can be running in place too and answering questions. They can be doing jumping jacks. They can be doing things that are bringing up their heart rate if that's your goal of the moderate to vigorous physical activity. So all of the physical activity you choose what you want your students to focus on. So you can specifically use cardiovascular activities with these other science, technology, engineering, art, and math.
Sure, that last one really gets them moving. That's a great activity. Last question that we got, and you touched on this before. Do you find colleagues, supervisors, students, and parents, we gotta think about the parents too, get behind this cross-curricular PE style? And do you have any tips for getting reluctant staff on board with us here?
Yeah, that's the big one. And as I mentioned, we're preaching to the choir here, and I really appreciate you all, joining in. And it's sad that for the most part we're looked at heretics and witches, and that here we are looking at technology, especially technology. But in physical education, it's already innate in what we do. I mean, it is science, it is math, it is technology, it is engineering, and that for a lot of people that we have to convince that this is something that we're doing is sad, especially when you're looking at the multiple intelligences and the fact that 95% of your students are not kinesthetic learners. We're kinesthetic learners, and we teach the way we feel comfortable. And it feels weird when we teach outside of the box, but that's where our students are at. And we need to get them on board with why is physical activity important. So I feel it's so necessary to explain, usually when the parents understand, because I had to deal with that in my elementary school, that they were like competitive. And I said, well, no, I want them to be well-rounded individuals, and this is how I'm going to do it. And here's how to try to get you on board with that. And it took some time, but when they saw the product, of the students then seeing, oh, look, they're getting better at it, or now they're even interested in it, where they weren't even interested in physical education before, and now they're talking about it, and they want to join bowling because they like the math aspect of it, because they find that easy to do, whereas other people, doing scoring is, impossible to do, or, doing other, either science or math or any of it, and that the students really do enjoy it. And at first, they might even seem a little hesitant, but when I said, is it fair that we're only teaching, I taught in New York City, and they only were taught softball, basketball, volleyball, and at the end, they didn't learn anything. And it was just really, their grade was based on attendance, because we had 150 students to one teacher. And it was, were you there? Were you dressed? And did you cut class? That was how your grade was. And I said to the students, is that fair that that's all you're graded on? You're not graded on cognitive, affective, or psychomotor. And they were like, you're right, hey, and they bought into it. And that was great. And I had no problem after that when I said, is this fair? That's all you're graded on. Now, that worked for me because of my situation. But I know others saying the more students we can involve, especially principals, once you explain to the principal, hey, we can reach all learners through STEM and through STEAM, then you have their ears, and that it increases their score on their testing, and now they're really involved. They're, oh, tell me more about that, and here's how we do it, and I will incorporate the STEAM, and they're usually right on board.
Really good advice. Thank you, Dr. Hunter, and great questions, guys. Thank you for submitting those. Just a few more things before we wrap up here today. I firstly want to mention the winner of our STEM in the Gym. We're going to send out a Big Gears demonstrator pack, so this is perfect for teaching some of those technology and those physics concepts. And the winner is Ginny Kalari. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that last name correctly, from New Jersey. We will get with you, Ginny, here. We'll get your school address, and we'll get those sent out right away. Congratulations. And just a reminder to keep an eye peeled for your participation certificate. That will be in a few days' time. The recording of today's webinar, I know we ran a little bit late, so if you missed a piece of this, you can go back, listen in, and catch up with us. And I really appreciate it again for joining us today. Thank you guys for what you do. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next month. Bye, everyone.
Bye.